ॐ परतत्त्वे सदा लीनो रामकृष्णसमाज्ञया यो धर्मस्थापनरतो वीरेशं तं नमाम्यहम्. We are studying Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, and we are in the almost last chapter, 7th chapter, called Dhyan and Samadhi. So, we have seen Yama Niyama, which are moral mental trainings, asana, posture for steadily sitting and meditating. The main principle Swamiji told was that the Sushumna passes through the spinal cord and it is very thin. So if you sit crooked, it gets blocked. And the spiritual currents pass through that. So it should not be blocked. Then pranayama, before that a small thing called Nadi Shuddhi. And pranayama Swamiji explained in great detail. It is not only checking the breath, checking the lungs motion to check the breath, and through that to enter the original source of all energy in the entire world. All world is connected, and so through our prana we are entering the entire cosmic energy, and if we are able to control that, we control the whole world, we control our mind simultaneously. Otherwise, controlling the world and without controlling our mind will become like Ravanas or Hitler. So, controlling the entire world along with controlling our mind. Then we thought pratyahara. The normal tendency of the mind is to go out through the indriyas to objects. But if that continues, we can never think of our reality. So to get the knowledge of our reality or to realize it or to become free from the trapping of body and mind, we have to withdraw our mind from going outside. We have to stop the indriyas from going outside. We have to stop the mind from going to the indriyas. And here in Raja Yoga, it is done mainly through will. Because somebody asked a question, I replied to him also. That it is similar to Uparati of Jnana Yoga. If you know remember the definition. Shama Dhamma Uparati. And I replied that it is almost the same, but the process is different. In Jnana Yoga, we are using our discriminative knowledge. And in Raja Yoga, we are applying our will. That is why Shankaracharya has called this Raja Yoga as Hatha Yoga sometimes. So, then comes the next topic, Dhyan and Samadhi. Here the funny thing is, Swamiji has not talked about dhyana at all. So dhyana is on the way to samadhi. Dhyana is concentration, samadhi is absolute concentration. So we read now, we have taken a cursory view of the different steps in Raja Yoga. Cursory because details are infinite, except the finer ones. The training in concentration. So Dhyana and Samadhi both he calls training in concentration, which is the goal to which Raja Yoga will lead us. So Raja Yoga will lead us to that goal, which is training in concentration. We say, as human beings, now he shows 3 levels of working of the mind. And we use the word consciousness to denote Brahman or knowledge. But Swamiji is using the word consciousness to show the surface consciousness. You understand this point? I am conscious with I am the doer, I am the knower. So this consciousness I handle every time, and my reason also works on that. But when I do certain things like breathing, I do unconsciously. So unconsciously, without consciousness, it cannot be work. So unconsciously means without I consciousness, without the awareness outside. That is the meaning. And then in samadhi, I go beyond I consciousness. So consciousness is common in all the three. What Swamiji is calling unconsciousness is deeper subconsciousness. And like that, there is super consciousness. So to establish that, Swamiji, so the word consciousness is used in this sense. Rational consciousness, subconsciousness, above consciousness. Three states of consciousness. So he starts now. We say as human beings that all our knowledge which is called rational is referred to consciousness. Rational, our buddhi plays on that. So that is on the surface, consciousness. My consciousness of this table and of your presence makes me know that the table and you are here. My surface, it works to see you. It works to see the table. So I know that you are the table. At the same time, there is a very great part of my existence of which I am not conscious. That means it is not attached to I consciousness. All the different organs inside the body, the different parts of the brain, nobody is conscious of them. I am not conscious of my hasta indriya. I am not conscious of my chakshu. So, nobody is conscious. But it is happening. When I eat food, I do it consciously. When I assimilate it, I do it unconsciously. When the food is manufactured into blood, it is done unconsciously. When out of the blood all the different parts of my body are strengthened, it does unconsciously. And yet it is I who am doing all this. There cannot be 20 people in this one body. I am eating food, somebody is digesting, that cannot be true. How do I know that I do it and nobody else? It may be heard that my business is only in eating and assimilating the food, and that strengthening the body by the food is done for me by someone else. It may be argued. So Swamiji is showing that is not true, so the argument he puts up, that cannot be, because it can be demonstrated that almost every action of which we are now unconscious can be brought up to the plane of consciousness. That is the real proof. What is being done unconsciously can be brought to conscious level. I can consciously breathe pranayam. I can consciously see my digestion of the food. So yogis, or when we make our mind settler, we can see that. So they are also conscious, but today we are not aware of them. Vedanta generally does not like to call it unconscious. It calls subconscious, deeper subconscious. The heart is beating apparently without our control. None of us here can control the heart. it goes on its own way. But by practice, men can bring even the heart under control until it will just beat at will, slowly or quickly, or almost stop. Almost stop because if heart stops, then we will not live. So almost stop. Nearly every part of the body can be brought under control. What does this show? That the functions which are beneath consciousness are also performed by us, only we are doing it unconsciously. So to prove that, Swamiji said the only proof is that we can bring it under control. We have then two planes in which the human mind works. First is the conscious plane, in which all work is always accompanied with the feeling of egoism. I do it. I perceive, I do. Next comes the unconscious plane, where all work is unaccompanied by the feeling of egoism. That part of mind work which is unaccompanied with the feeling of egoism is unconscious work, and that part which is accompanied with the feeling of egoism is conscious work. Now, where it works? In the lower animals means within animals he is not telling lower animals, na? Lower animals means animals which are lower than man. In the lower animals, this unconscious work is called instinct. In higher animals, within animals he has done some different, like gorilla, orangutan or like that. In higher animals and in the highest of all animals, man, what is called conscious work prevails. Means unconscious work also is going on, but conscious work prevails. They are only unconscious work. But it does not end here. Swamiji has brought these two to show third. There is a still higher plane upon which the mind can work. It can go beyond consciousness. Actually, the use of the word mind here is according to Rajoga Patanjali. The real word will be consciousness. But Swamiji is using consciousness here for the levels. That means I raise my consciousness above my mind. Understand? But here the expression is that my mind I am raising above the conscious plane. Just as unconscious work is beneath consciousness, so it is called subconscious. Yes.
When Swamiji is talking about conscious means ego is at that place.
Conscious means of which we are aware.
Means ego is there, mind is there.
You see, one thing is that we are aware. And always it is accompanied with I am the doer, I am the experiencer. So ego. Ego does not mean pride and all that. Ego means I. I am the doer, I am the experiencer. I am aware of it, that is the experiencer. But I am the doer also.
When Swami talking about third stage means you want to raise mind above, go beyond mind.
Yes. In Vedanta, in Brihadaranyaka we are reading, you have missed that mind, Indriyas, body, if we are identified with any of them or attached to any one of them, we remain individuals. And Papa is absolutely essential part of it. Because our being individual itself is the source of all bad action. Brihadaranyaka says, if you can give up these three, body, Indriyas, mind, then I consciousness can be joined to Hiranyagarbha. I consciousness can be joined to universal consciousness. And if we can do that, then what will happen? This mind, Indriyas and body which we had left behind, they will also come up. and their original form is gods. That means Agni Devata. Agni Devata, when becomes individualized, has become my speech. Now I stop using my speech and I become identified with Hiranyagarbha. Then this speech also will become Agni Devata again. This is what Buddha has taught us. Understood? Example I gave one day, Turiyananji, do you remember? In Kashi, Turiyanji sitting with his disciples on a ghat. And at a little distance on the same ghat, one continuous ghat is there in Kashi if you see. Name changes, Dashaswamedh ghat, this ghat, this ghat. So at a little distance, another sadhu is sitting with his group. What they are doing, nobody knows. And Turiyananda is talking about universal mind. Suddenly he stops and says, some of you who want to see some fun, go and sit there. That sadhu is trying to read my mind. So one or two people went there. And the sadhu was telling, I will tell you what is in his mind. And he told one or two things and then stopped. Please tell more. No, I am not able to find it. So these two people who had gone, they came back. Turiyanji said, did you see the fun? He said, we saw but we could not understand anything. First tell us how that sadhu was knowing your mind. He said, it is a simple siddhi. Swami Vivekananda has taught all of us. In his language simple, make your mind blank and look at that person. You will know all his thoughts. Then why he stopped? Then he tells, is mind the only level? I raise my consciousness above mind. There he has no gati. Understood? Then they ask, how you know that he is reading your mind? He said, I am not doing that through some siddhi. But I was talking to you about universal mind. So my mind is joined with the universal mind. And there it shines what he is thinking of me. Understood this point? Now one of our devotees in Nagpur, Vedanta was his name. In old age he took sannyas outside, Vedananda. So he asked me one day that sometimes it appears that our Swami knows our mind. What do you feel? He is asking me. I said, I will tell you. Sometimes we feel, but he is knowing it always. He is knowing our mind always. Sometimes we understand he is knowing our mind. So that is the nature of universal mind. But it does not end here. There is a still higher plane upon. So I told you the terminology, you understood now. There is a still higher plane upon which the mind can work. It can go beyond consciousness, this surface consciousness. Just as unconscious work is beneath consciousness, so there is another work which is above consciousness and which also is not accompanied with the feeling of egoism. There you do not feel, I am doing this or I am knowing this. In samadhi. The feeling of egoism is only on the middle plane. You understand? Egoism is not pride here. That is called egotism. But I am there, I am conscious of myself. When the mind is above or below that line, there is no feeling of I, and yet the mind works. When the mind goes beyond this line of self-consciousness, it is called samadhi or super-consciousness. Means consciousness is there, Unconsciousness, consciousness, super consciousness. No, unconsciousness also has consciousness beneath. So this is above. When the mind goes beyond this line of self-consciousness, it is called samadhi or super-consciousness. How, for instance, do we know that now, how to know it? How, for instance, do we know that a man in samadhi has not gone below consciousness, has not degenerated instead of going higher? In both cases, the works are unaccompanied with egoism. The answer is by the effects, by the results of the work. We know that which is below and that which is above. If you want to write a Sanskrit line on that, Phalena parichiyate. Phalena parichiyate. By the result, you understand. We understand something by its result. Phalena parichiyate. When a man goes into deep sleep, he enters a plane beneath consciousness. He works the body all the time. He breathes. He moves the body perhaps in his sleep without any accompanying feeling of ego. He is unconscious. And when he returns from his sleep, he is the same man who went into it. Result. The sum total of the knowledge which he had before he went into the sleep remains the same. It does not increase at all. No enlightenment comes. But when a man goes into samadhi, if he goes into it a fool, he comes out a sage. That means in that state, the door to infinite knowledge is open. That is the phala. What makes the difference? From one state a man comes out the very same man that he went in, and from another state the man comes out enlightened, a sage, a prophet, a saint. His whole character changed, his life changed, illumined. These are the two effects. Now the effects being different, the causes must be different. As this illumination with which a man comes back from samadhi is much higher than can be got from unconsciousness, or much higher than can be got by reasoning. By reasoning you cannot know all these things. Nature of the soul, nature of Brahman, Punarjanma, Ishvara, nothing we can know by reason. But in this state we know it directly. In a conscious state of mind, therefore, be super consciousness and samadhi. Some misprint is there, na? The it should be, na? Is it the there? Therefore, after therefore, what is the word?
Be super conscious.
Huh?
Be super.
Be.
It must be.
Wait. Let me read the whole sentence again, huh? Oh, it must therefore be, take it. It must therefore be super consciousness, and samadhi is called the super conscious state. This in short is the idea of samadhi. That means concentration which will make us, our consciousness level, go above. What is its application? The application is here. The field of reason or of conscious workings of the mind is narrow and limited. There is a little circle within which human remains. Human reason must move. It cannot go beyond. Every attempt to go beyond is impossible. because I consciousness is there, it is limited only. Yet it is beyond this circle of reason that there lies all that humanity holds most dear. All these questions, whether there is an immortal soul, whether there is a God, whether there is any supreme intelligence guiding this universe or not, are beyond the field of reason. Because the data is not there. Reason can never answer these questions. What does reason say? It says, I am agnostic. I do not know either yeah or nay. These are American forms of yes or no. Yet these questions are so important to us. Without a proper answer to them, human life will be purposeless. All our ethical theories, all our moral attitudes, all that is good and great in human nature have been molded upon answers that have come from beyond the circle. Molded upon, means from that we get the answer. It is very important, therefore, that we should have answers to these questions. If life is only a short play, if the universe is only a fortuitous combination of atoms, then why should I do good to another? So ethics cannot be explained without samadhi. Why should there be mercy, justice, or fellow feeling? The best thing for this world would be to make hay while the sun shines, each man for himself. If there is no hope, why should I love my brother and not cut his throat? If there is nothing beyond, if there is no freedom but only rigorous dead laws, I should only try to make myself happy here. We will find people saying nowadays that their utilitarian grounds as the basis of moral. In Swamiji's time it seems very prevalent. So in every time Swamiji has replied to this utilitarian. What is this basis? Procuring the greatest amount of happiness to the greatest number. That is called utilitarian. Why should I do that? But how it is rational? Why should I not produce the greatest unhappiness to the greatest number? If that serves my purpose? You know, people are doing like that, no? You know, the corona is brought about by vaccination companies. One American and China's lab, they are together in that. So that their vaccines will be sold. For that thousands of people will die, they do not care. And now, third wave you have heard. What is that third wave? You have heard about third wave. Third wave will affect small children. Because up till now, the vaccines are not given to small children. But the company is producing such vaccine which can be given to small children. And they have started this shout. Third wave. So, commercial truth. So if life is only a short play, if the universe is only a fortuitous combination of atoms, then why should I do good to another? Why should there be mercy, justice, or fellow feeling? The best thing for this world would be to make hay while the sun shines, each man for himself. Now Swamiji, after America, first time I was a little impressed by America. But then in the second visit he is telling, what is America? Each man for himself and they will take the hindmost. That means competition. If you are last in the line, they will take you. You will not get anything. That is life. You cannot understand. In England, in London, 31st December, some day in the Second World War, there was in the night heavy bombing on London. Now 4 people are sitting at food. Father, mother, son and daughter-in-law. And the father is praying, God save me and my wife. My son and his wife. We 4 and no more. Swamiji in America, people are sitting at breakfast. Swamiji is taking bath. So when he comes out, they ask him that your chanting was extremely beautiful. But what was the meaning? Can you tell us? Then he told this. Sarvetra Sukhina Santu, your Purusha Sukta, so that I am praying for the universe to be happy. They said, we have never had this idea. Our preacher preaches only to pray for ourselves, at the most for our family. This idea, man can pray for the whole world, this idea itself is not there in our country. So that is what is happening. If there is nothing beyond, if there is no freedom, but only rigorous dead laws, I should only try to make myself happy here. You will find people saying nowadays that they have utilitarian grounds as the basis of morality. What is this basis? Procuring the greatest amount of happiness to the greatest number. Why should I do that? Why should I not produce the greatest unhappiness to the greatest number? If that serves my purpose, how will utilitarians answer this question? How do you know what is right or what is wrong? You know, Buddha's expression is similar. Bahujana hitaya, Bahujana sukhaya. Buddha was born this way. So, happiness, maximum people. How do you know what is right or what is wrong? I am impelled by my desire for happiness and I fulfill it. And it is in my nature. I know nothing beyond. I have these desires and must fulfill them. Why should you complain? Whence come all these truths about human life, about morality, about the immortal soul, about God, about love and sympathy, about being good, and above all, about being unselfish? All ethics, all human actions, and all human thought hang upon this one idea of unselfishness. The whole idea of human life can be put into that one word, unselfishness. Yajna arthat karmano natra lokohyam karma bandhana. Why should we be unselfish? Where is the necessity, the force, the power of my being unselfish? You call yourself a rational man, a utilitarian, but if you do not show me a reason for utility, I say you are irrational. Show me the reason why I should not be selfish. To ask one to be unselfish may be good as poetry, but poetry is not reason. Show me a reason. Why shall I be unselfish and why be good? Because Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so say so does not weigh with me. Where is the utility of my being unselfish? My utility is to be selfish if utility means the greatest amount of happiness. What is the answer? The utilitarian can never give it. The answer is that this world is only one drop in an infinite ocean. One link in an infinite chain. You understand? Mark this sentence, huh? Where did those that preach unselfishness and taught it to the human race got the idea? We know it is not instinctive because the animals which have instinct do not know it. Neither is it reason. Reason does not know anything about these ideas. When did they come? We find in studying history of religions, one fact held in common by all the great teachers of religion the world ever had They all claim to have got their truths from beyond. Only many of them did not know where they got them from. Here the Swamiji is bringing that. I think he will bring in the next paragraph. For instance, one would say that an angel came down in the form of a human being with wings and said to him, "Here, O man, this is the message." This is about whom? Muhammad. Another says that a Deva, a bright being, appeared to him. A third says he dreamed, that his ancestor came and told him certain things. He did not know anything beyond that, but this is common, that all claim that this knowledge has come to them from beyond, not through their reasoning power. What does the science of yoga teach? It teaches that they were right in claiming that all this knowledge came to them from beyond reasoning, but that it came from within themselves, not from outside somewhere, within themselves. You have to dive deep and you get that answer. The yogi teaches that the mind itself has a higher state of existence. In this way, Swamiji has proved that. Beyond reason, a superconscious state. And when the mind gets to that higher state, then this knowledge beyond reasoning comes to man. Metaphysical and transcendental knowledge comes to that man. Transcendental beyond the senses. Metaphysics means beyond the ordinary physics. This state of going beyond reason, transcending ordinary human nature, may sometimes come by chance to a man who does not understand its science. Because it is there. So sometimes what happens, you are walking on a street and you stumble. And you stumble and fall, you find gold there. But do not have the science of how to know the gold. Who does not understand science, he as it were stumbles upon it. When he stumbles upon it, he generally interprets it as coming from outside. Because it is in the deeper layers of the mind, so it does come. So this explains why an inspiration or transcendental knowledge may be the same in different countries, but in one country it will be seen to come through an angel, and in another through a Deva, and in a third through God. What does it mean? It means that the mind brought the knowledge by its own nature, and that the findings of the knowledge were interpreted according to the belief and education of the person through whom it came. The real fact is that these various men, as it were, stumbled upon this superconscious state. Here Swamiji brings some examples. The yogi says there is a great danger in stumbling upon this state. In a good many cases, there is the danger of the brain being deranged. And as a rule, you will find that all those men, however great they were, who had stumbled upon this superconscious state without understanding it, groped in the dark, and generally had, along with their knowledge, some quaint superstition. They opened themselves to hallucinations. Muhammad claimed that the angel Gabriel came to him in a cave one day and took him on the heavenly horse Harak, and he visited the heavens. But with all that, Muhammad spoke some wonderful truths. If you read the Quran, you find the most wonderful truths mixed with superstitions. How will you explain it? That man was inspired, no doubt, but that inspiration was, as it were, stumbled upon. Swamiji is very outspoken and clear about everything. He was not a trained yogi and did not know the reason of what he was doing. Think of the good Muhammad did to the world, and think of the great evil that has been done through his fanaticism. Think of the millions massacred through his teachings. Mothers bereft of their children, children made orphans, whole countries destroyed, millions upon millions of people killed in Swamiji's time. And it continues. So we see this danger by studying the lives of great teachers like Muhammad and others, yet we find at the same time that they were all inspired. Whenever a prophet got into the superconscious state by heightening his emotional nature, he brought away from it not only some truth, but some fanaticism also, emotion. That by kirtan and all that, they go into that state. Some superstition which injure the world as much as the greatness of the teaching help. To get any reason out of the mass of incongruity we call human life, we have to transcend our reason, but we must do it scientifically. Slowly, by regular practice, and we must cast off all superstition. We must take up the study of the superconscious state just as any other science. On the reason we must have to lay our foundation. We must follow reason as far it leads. Then we have to go beyond. And when the reason fails, reason itself will show the way to the higher plane. When you hear a man say, I am inspired, and then talk irrationally, reject it. Why? Because these three states, instinct, reason and superconsciousness, or the unconscious, conscious and superconscious states, belong to one and the same mind. There are not three minds in a man, but one state of it develops into the other. Instinct develops into reason, and reason into the transcendental consciousness. Therefore, not one of the states contradicts the others. Real inspiration never contradicts reason, but fulfills it. That means where reason cannot go, there it shows, so it fulfills. Just as you find the great prophet saying, came not to destroy but to fulfill. This is Jesus' spirit question. Our inspiration always comes in to fulfill reason. So, inspiration always comes to fulfill reason and is in harmony with it. All the different steps in yoga are intended to bring us scientifically to the superconscious state or samadhi. In this way, he has connected all these steps. Furthermore, this is a most vital point to understand that inspiration is as much in every man's nature as it was in that of the ancient prophets. That means if they were inspired, we can also be inspired. These prophets were not unique. They were men, as you or I. They were great yogis. They had gained this superconsciousness, and you and I can get the same. They were not peculiar people. Rishi is avatar. What we do? He is avatar. He is Rishi. So we get separated from them. They may be avatar, they may be God, but they came with human mind. No? The very purpose of avatar is defeated if you do not study his human nature. These prophets were not unique. They were men as you or I. They were great yogis. They had gained this super consciousness, and you and I can get the same. They were not peculiar people. The very fact that one man ever reached that state proves that it is possible for every man to do so. This is rationality. Not only is it possible, but every man must eventually get to that state, and that is religion. This is Swamiji's definition of religion. In that Hinduism and Ramakrishna, Swamiji says, you have not stepped even on the first step of religion unless you have supersensuous experience. Experience is the only teacher we have. We may talk and reason all our lives, but we shall not understand a word of truth until we experience it ourselves. You cannot hope to make a man a surgeon by simply giving him a few books. You cannot satisfy my curiosity to see a country by showing me a map. I must have actual experience. Maps can only create curiosity in us to get more perfect knowledge. Beyond that, they have no value whatever. Clinging to books only degenerates the human mind. Was there ever a more horrible blasphemy? Blasphemy is blaming God. Ishwar Ninda. Then the statement that all the knowledge of God is confined to this or that book. How dare men call God infinite and yet try to compress him within the covers of a little book? Millions of people have been killed because they did not believe what the book said. Because they would not see all the knowledge of God within the covers of a book. Of course, this killing and murdering has gone by. Still it is going on. But the world is still tremendously bound up in a belief in books. In order to reach the superconscious state in a scientific manner, it is necessary to pass through the various steps of Raja Yoga. I have been teaching. After Pratyahara and Dharana, now we come to that, we come to Dhyana, meditation. When the mind has become trained to remain fixed on a certain internal or external location, Dharana, there comes to it the power of flowing in an unbroken current, as it were, towards that point. Understood? The whole mind is flowing in a current to that point. This state is called dhyana. When one has so intensified the power of dhyana as to be able to reject the external part of perception and remain meditating only on the internal part, the tanmatras and all that we go on seeing by concentration. The meaning, that's only on the internal part, the meaning, that state is called samadhi. The three, dharana, dhyana and samadhi, together are called sanyama. That is, if the mind can first concentrate upon an object and then be able to continue in that concentration for a length of time, and then by continued concentration to dwell only on the internal part of the perception of which the object was the effect, everything comes under the control of such a mind. That is called sanyama. The meditative state is the highest state of existence. This is an important para, oft quoted outside Raja Yoga also. The meditative state is the highest state of existence. So long as there is desire, no real happiness can come. It is only the contemplative, witness-like study of object that brings to us real enjoyment and happiness. The animal has its happiness in the senses, the man in his intellect, and the God in spiritual contemplation. It is only to the soul that has attained to that contemplative state that the world really becomes beautiful. Because the meaning of everything is seen. To him who desires nothing and does not mix himself up with them, the manifold changes of nature are one panorama of beauty and sublimity. What is beauty? What is sublimity? You know these two words? If by seeing or hearing, by experiencing something, you get ananda, it is called beautiful. Okay? Now this ananda is of two types. You see a flower and you feel joy, and you pluck that flower, smell it and throw it away. So the ananda of enjoyment type. Now you see Himalayas. You feel ananda and your mind is raised above. That is called sublimity. Sublimity is the joy which takes the mind above. That is sublime. There is a conversation between Yudhishthira and Draupadi. When we were in the Vanavas, Swamiji has mentioned it. They were in the Tarai, what we call it, foot of Himalayas. Then Draupadi is asking, you are always saying God, 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 what has God given you? Yudhishthira says, I am not a businessman in the field of religion. That I am saying God, God, and God should give something. See the Himalayas, I love it. Because they are bhavya and divya, great and great. God is the greatest, so I love it. That is sublimity. These ideas have to be understood in dhyana or meditation. We hear a sound. First, there is the external vibration. Second, the nerve motion that carries it to the mind. Third, the reaction from the mind, along with which flashes the knowledge of the object which was the external cause of these different changes, from the ethereal vibrations to the mental reaction. Ethereal means through the space. These three are called in yoga Shabda, Artha and Jnana. In the language of physics and physiology, they are called the ethereal vibration, the motion in the nerve and brain, and the mental reaction. Now these, though distinct processes, have become mixed up in such a fashion as to become quite indistinct. We cannot separate them. In fact, we cannot now perceive any of these. When we perceive their combined effect, what we call the external object, every act of perception includes these three, and there is no reason why we should not be able to distinguish them by concentration. When by the previous preparations it becomes strong and controlled and has the power of finer perception, the mind should be employed in meditation. The meditation must begin with gross objects and slowly rise to finer and finer until it becomes objectless. The mind should first be employed in perceiving the external causes of sensation, then the internal motions, and then its own reaction. When it has succeeded in perceiving the external causes of sensation by themselves, the mind will acquire the power of perceiving all fine material existences, all fine bodies and forms. When it can succeed in perceiving the motion inside by themselves, it will gain the control of all mental waves, in itself or in others, even before they have translated themselves into physical energy. A man thinks something, then he acts, but that thought itself he will perceive. And when he will be able to perceive the mental reaction by itself, the yogi will acquire the knowledge of everything. As every sensible object and every thought is the result of this reaction. In short, Swamiji, this is all Patanjali's complete treatment Swamiji is giving in this short. Then we will have seen the very foundations of his mind, and it will be under his perfect control. Different powers will come to it, to the yogi. And if he yields to the temptation of any one of these, the road to his further progress will be barred. Such is the evil of running after enjoyment, because the mind is carried outside again. But if he is strong enough to reject even these miraculous powers, he will attain to the goal of yoga, the complete separation of the waves in the ocean of the mind. Separation is the word he has used. Then the glory of the soul, undisturbed by the distractions of the mind or motions of the body, will shine in its full effulgence, and the yogi will find himself as he is and as he always was, real nature. The essence of knowledge, the immortal, the all-pervading, he will find himself to be this. Essence of knowledge, immortal, all. Samadhi is the property of every human being, nay, every animal. From the lowest animal to the highest angel, sometime or other each one will have to come to that state by becoming man and then complete. And then alone will real religion begin for him. That is that place again. Until then we only struggle towards that stage. There is no difference now between us and those who have no religion, because we have no experience. What is concentration good for? Save to bring us to this experience. Each one of the steps got in Samadhi has been reasoned out, properly adjusted, scientifically organized, and when faithfully practiced, will surely lead us to the desired end. Then will all sorrows cease, all miseries vanish, the seeds for actions will be burned. That means our consciousness of I am the doer will go away. And the soul will be free forever, free from mind. Okay? So completed. One more chapter is left. That is from Kurma Puran. Swamiji has brought this summary of yoga. And that is fully Vedantic. Om Paratatve Sadalino Ramakrishna Samagyaya Yo Dharma Sthapana Rato Viresham Tam Namamyam Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.